Today we're going to do a quick review of some of the best rallies in Rise of Kingdoms, and I'll talk a little bit about how they get countered. So stick around in this video for a breakdown of the rally meta in Rise of Kingdoms as of November 2023. Let's go. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And I just want to very briefly review what I think the rally meta is right now. We're going to talk about the very best rallies that you can use, and we'll talk a little bit about some anti-swarm options. Although honestly, for the most part, all rallies are vulnerable to being swarmed if there's a sufficient number of enemies present. So let's actually start with the Cavalry, and in my opinion, your number one Cavalry rally, as of right now, is Nevsky Primary, and of course Nevsky is involved, he's busted, and a Justinian Secondary, and I think you want them to be in that order. So what's going on with this combo? And look, I actually have not maxed Justinian yet, although that is a commander that I aspire to max. So Justinian is really crazy for rallying for a number of reasons. And this is, I think, in large part because his skills are focused on rallying garrisons, right? And he's okay in the field, but he gets all these extra bonuses when you hit a garrison. So for example, he can act as if the garrison is surrounded, rocking 2,500 damage factor and flipping a 30% defense reduction onto the target, which is huge. He's got 30% defense, 5% cavalry damage boost, which is amazing. He's got 20% health, very critical for any rally to sort of be survivable. And when you're hitting cities or strongholds, you take less normal attack damage, super relevant with the normal attack meta. Last but not least, he's giving you a cavalry attack boost, and whenever you launch a normal attack while on the map, which, yes, when you're rallying, you're on the map, you have a chance to deal additional damage factor. If I had to guess as to why is it that Justinian is supposed to be the secondary in this combo, I think it has to do with Nevsky's fourth skill. And if we just remind ourselves really quickly of how that works, Nevsky's fourth skill makes it so that skill damage is increased by an extra 35% for 4 seconds after using an active skill. So it's sort of self-buffing your skill damage, and then you hit them with Justinian's big damage. I think that is why the combo works best in that order. So the Nevsky-Justinian combo is really strong. I think this is the build that you ultimately use. I suppose you could go for, I don't know, a variant of this where you go for the attack reduction disarm, but it seems a little weird to me that you would do that. You basically go all in on Feral Nature. You go and you get Emblazoned Shield to reduce the skill damage you take, and you get the extra rage. For the most part, you care about archers, but if you weren't rallying archers, then I suppose you could put these 3 points somewhere else and get a little bit of value. I mean, I don't like going for Naked Rage, increasing the skill damage you take, but I suppose in a world where Liu, Chat, and Gorgo aren't doing skill damage, increasing your skill damage and then taking more skill damage is not as big of a downfall anymore, is it? So that actually could be a very curious technical play to swap those 3 talent points. Remember, this does damage over time enhancement, and there are no damage over time effects here, at least not that I can remember. So the Nevsky Justinian is a crazy cavalry rally. Every now and then, you will still see the use of Attila. And Attila is not an amazing rally. You basically are doing this in order to make yourself really anti-swarm. I think that might still be Cavalry's best anti-swarm option. I've not thought about this as much as perhaps I should, though. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I've always been kind of unimpressed with the Attila Nevsky rally, but it is a pain to swarm. And if you went with an Attila Justinian, right, it would really hurt to swarm that, and you would still deal some pretty big damage. So that is an option to get more anti-swarm, although in general, if you want to be anti-swarm, you generally just stop using Cavalry. So what do you use for anti-swarm at this point? Well, your best infantry rally, although it's getting pretty dated, is Tariq ibn Ziyad with Sargon the Great. I have used this. It is still okay, but I am pretty worried about how it is countered by a lot of the garrisons that exist today. So generally, if you're using infantry, the way that you're doing that with a rally is Tariq ibn Ziyad with Pakal. Tariq ibn Ziyad with Pakal is pretty darn difficult to swarm. It hurts a lot to actually go and do this, but it is still very achievable with a sufficiently wailed up and committed group. So if you're running infantry, you can use the Tariq ibn Ziyad with Pakal or Sargon combo. Pakal for the anti-swarm, but you are missing out on a lot of damage. So if you're going to do that, it's because you're going to be swarming with the rally and you have inevitability, or it is a tanking rally and you have other rallies that are going to be hitting as well. But again, if the enemy goes and decides to swarm just one of the DPS rallies, did it matter that you have a sort of tanking rally? I would say probably not. In terms of the build for Tariq ibn Ziyad, this is what I'd recommend. Theoretically, if you're not hitting cavalry, you can reallocate these 3 points away in the Iron Spear. Generally, though, I figure, well, they'll probably swarm you with some cavalry, so it's nice to just leave these talent points and wreck the swarmers. But it would be better to go and get balance. So if you really want to micromanage every single rally, you could take your points off if you're not rallying into cavalry. You could drop those into balance. You'll need 1 more point to flip that over. I suppose you've got to carve that off of Undying Fury, and you can max out balance if that's what you want to do. So there is, one question that I still sort of have, which is, well, what about Tariq ibn Ziyad with Liu Cha? And that might be an exciting rally, but I think there's other rallies that are way more exciting that I want to talk about. And those more exciting rallies that I want to talk about are going to be with archers. Henry is an absolute freaking menace. It's actually shocking how long Henry has been rally meta for archers. So what is Henry going to do for you? Henry is going to do nice single target damage and reduce the skill damage you take by a meaningful amount. The funny thing is that the new infantry counter this, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. The other thing is that Henry makes your garrison take more skill damage. So the thing you're rallying is going to take more skill damage. It's a really great debuff. So if you're multi-rallying, Henry is just really exceptional in particular. But even with a single rally, Henry with Zhuge Liang is going to do a lot of damage. There is one problem with this, however, which is that it's honestly pretty swarmable. And there's not really a great way to make archers super anti-swarm. Your best technology for that, as far as I know, is actually the old school Nebu. And Nebu is giving you a 30% counterattack damage boost and a 30% archer defense boost. So to my knowledge, Nebu would be your best bet from an anti-swarm standpoint for pairing with your Henry, but it's not great, okay? There's not really an amazing archer anti-swarm that I'm aware of here. When we talk about what else you could do with archers, I'll point out that archers actually do have a lot of technology. So, for example, if the enemy is using a Xeno, then in that instance, it turns out the thing you want to really do is use Gilgamesh. So if they've got Xeno, you swap in the Gilgamesh. And if they have Gorgo, you swap out the Henry and you bring in Zhuge Liang. So you'd use a Gilgamesh Zhuge Liang or Zhuge Liang Gilgamesh, depending on how you want to run that. And there's a number of reasons why Gilgamesh is just like really powerful in this context. First of all, he takes less normal attack damage. This ends up being super relevant for the normal attack meta with smite damage, but also he makes the target take more skill damage. And if they're healing, then like, boom, he's going to wreck you, man. Every time you heal, you're going to be taking damage. He also has a health debuff, which is really nice. So Gilga is seeing relevance all over again in just like a really weird way. Now look, I'm not going to pretend that these are all the rally combos you can run. In fact, what about the situation where you're in a KvK that has an artifact? For those that haven't seen it, there is an artifact in certain KvKs, Warriors Unbound and the Stratagems KvK, last I checked, still has this, where you equip the artifact on a secondary commander and it flips their troop type. Well, when you can flip the troop type of a commander, turns out you can do some really busted rallies. My favorite really busted commanders for this are both Nevsky, so you could do like Tariq ibn Ziyad with Nevsky, or Henry, Tariq ibn Ziyad with Henry, or Tariq ibn Ziyad with Justinian. Those commanders, I think Nevsky and Justinian and Henry are just like really crazy when you flip them over to another troop type and you include them in that rally. Oh my God. You can do some really busted stuff there. And I'm quite confident there may be some other combos we haven't figured out yet. Like, I don't think you're supposed to rally with Gorgo and Liucha, but I haven't actually tried it, right? Like, there's things I want to try because even Constantine is strangely relevant in this new meta world that we live in, which, like, Card will be in the end screen in just a minute. See how Constantine is now strangely a meta garrison all over again. And by the way, if you did want some archer talents, the thing that I would recommend for you for rallying would be a combination of the archer tree and the support tree. So something like this is what you'd ultimately use. I recognize I'm using Amani here. This is the only use she gets in my roster at this point to show these talents, but you'd go all in on this archer tree for whistling arrows. 2 points into rejuvenate seems amazing to me, and emergency protection seems really, really good. I suppose you could come up with an alternate build if you were rallying Henry into Gorgo, but I probably would just not rally Henry into Gorgo these days. But that's something I've also covered in a separate video. So if you want to see why it is that Henry's not doing so well against the sort of smite meta, card will be in the end screen in just a second. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.